All right, so meanwhile, while we're just waiting for a couple more people to come in, if they do, if not, then we'll just jump in and get started. But I did get a couple messages asking how to get to extra practice. We did mention in class last time that taking extra practice tests and practicing on the SAT platform, all of those things are super, super helpful because it helps you go from here to the next level. Obviously, sitting in class is great, retaining the information is great there, but definitely take it to the next level. Doing extra practice is good. Now I know next week you guys are on break, so I know it sucks having to do some of this practice during break, but it definitely is a good opportunity to, practice some of the practice tests. So what I'm going to do is in the chat, I'm going to send you guys a link. Now, this link is the link to all practice exams that are out there on College Board. If you'll see here on my screen, if you just go to that link, you'll scroll down to the middle of the page and it says resources. Here you'll have about 10 different practice tests of essentially what we've been going over in class. Today we're going to delve into a little bit of practice tests together. Next class you guys are actually going to have a full-length practice test as well. It's going to be broken up into 2 classes so you guys don't have to do the full-length thing all in one sitting, but it going through these practice will help out. Now, if you are going to do this during the break or doing it outside of class, practice test 1 is the one that we're going to use in class. So I advise you not to do practice test 1. Any of the other practice tests, today we're going to work on practice test 5. So if you want to do something on your own, maybe test 3 or 6 through 10 are all up for grabs. So definitely utilize one of those if you want to do any additional practice. Someone said the ones in the book and College Board are the same, right? Yes, correct. So if you have the SAT College Board book, they're all going to be the same. Now, if you have an old version, it varies slightly. For example, they have, notice here it says like test 1 and then it jumps to test 3 and then there's no test 4 and jumps to test 5. So there is floating around a test 2 and 4 out there. However, they did take them down from the website. If you have the old book, you will have test 4 as well as test 2. However, if you have the new book, you're going to have everything identical to what's here. Someone said, I have the Princeton Review book. Are those practice tests the same? No. And I highly advise if you have not done these College Board ones, do not do the Princeton Review. Don't do the Kaplan ones. They're great for additional resources on top of whatever you do on the College Board and the Prep for Success website. But it's not perfectly indicative of what you're going to get on the test. It does vary slightly from what's on the test. So if you want the actual College Board practice test, what you're actually going to see on the test, this link is the best one to go to. Over any resource, this is going to be the resource. Now, if you have a Khan Academy account, this will also be the same practice test on the Khan Academy. However, I do highly suggest to not do it on Khan Academy and do it on these practice tests. The reason being is on Khan Academy, it's a different type of style than what you're going to have on the actual test. As of now, the test is a pen and paper exam. It is a PDF exam. So you are going to get something that looks like, here, I'll actually show you guys. So you guys can put it into application. You're going to get something like this, and it's going to say like reading test and everything, the questions and answers. So for all of that. However, on the Khan Academy, they have different structures where you have to click your answer. It tells you if you got it right or wrong. It's a little bit more interactive, but it isn't how you're going to see it on the test. So pretty much just moral of that is I want to replicate the test as best as possible. Someone said, if you already took the practice test on Khan Academy already, do you think it's practice test 1? I don't know which one you took on Khan Academy. There are 10 different ones on or actually 8 different ones on Khan Academy. So if you took one on Khan Academy, I don't know which one it is. If it does look familiar when you do practice test 1 with us together, that's okay. So you said, is it the pictured practice test one? So it could be this practice test one if you took practice test one on Khan Academy, but there's 8 different ones on Khan Academy. So I don't know which one you took. But if you want, just double check on your own, click on this practice test on the link, double check on the Khan Academy one and see which practice test you did. Someone said, if I finished all of those tests, do we do them again? It definitely can't hurt. Depends how far away you've done them. So let's say you did it last week. Doing it again, you probably remember everything, and it's probably not going to be too beneficial to do it again. Maybe finding one of the Prince Review or Kaplan, those would be fine. However, if you did them maybe a year, 2 years ago, and now you're looking to do them again, it's definitely going to be helpful to do it again. You probably don't remember all the questions. Also, even if you took them before this class, it could be helpful to do it again because you've learned so many new things in this class. So if so if you want to take a second shot at the same test, that is definitely going to be beneficial too. Let's see, another question. I think this is the one I did on Khan Academy. Okay, so if you did do this practice test one, when we come to this later on and we do practice test one, either that's great because now you've done it and now you can practice it again, or you can utilize one of the other practice tests and still use class time to practice problems. But we'll get to that later. Don't worry too much about it. These are just resources for you to use. If you've already done them, great, move on to something else. These are just additional resources. All right, so with that being said, does anyone have any questions on this resource that I just provided to you guys? Again, I'll put it in the chat for anyone that came late and wants it. Right. So this has all the full-length practice tests. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to delve into just lesson 7. That's the only thing that we have not done on the online platform yet. Oh, and keep in mind, the online platform is a great resource as well if you're not ready for full-length practice tests, but you do just want to practice specific areas. So, for example, if you know, parallel structure or different things like that are more complicated for you, those definitely are going to be, good to practice on the online platform. So, all right, so we're going to delve into lesson 7. Lesson 7 is going to have the parallel structure, also have false comparison. So, do you know? Oh, someone said, do you know if the SAT is going to be online yet? No, I don't know. I don't have any of that information yet. I do know that some of the other exams have been transferred to online. For example, there is the GRE, there's the GMAT, LSAT, things like that for law school, business school, and a lot of them are switching over now to online tests where you could actually take them in the comfort of your own home, which is amazing. However, they have not made that switch for the SAT yet. They've just postponed the exams. So as of now, the May test is postponed. That's no longer going to be happening. And also the June test is, as of now, still standing for, I believe it's June 6th. But they have not switched that to online yet. They'll probably make that decision a little bit down the line once we come closer to June if they're unable to do those testing centers. But if we hear anything of that, we'll be sure to send out the information out to you guys so you guys can have all of that information if it switches to online or if it's postponed or anything of that. But great question. Any other questions before we jump into lesson 7? All right, perfect. So we're going to start off with parallel structure. Oh, someone said, will we be going over reading? Yes, we are going parallel structure, finishing up lesson 7, and then going over reading today. The reason why we focus mainly on the language arts is simply because there's only about 10 tips for the reading, and then you just need to practice the reading. The reading is a little bit more independent practice, less actually like quote unquote teaching concepts. So we'll just be going over the content, doing a little bit of practice together, but then to really vamp up that reading score. Now, also keep in mind with the reading section, it counts the same as the language arts portion. So there's no concrete rules for the reading section. But notice as we're going through the language arts, there is concrete rules for the language arts. So if you know the concrete rules for the language arts, it's so much easier to get closer to that perfect score for the language arts. But for the reading, even if you know the tips and tricks, sure, it can help you get there, but it's still very hard if if you're struggling with the reading section. So that's why we focus predominantly on this language arts section, just because it's so much easier to improve. So if we have to prioritize things in the class, since it's obviously a very, short and truncated class, we want to go over the things that you can master real quick, and you could make sure that you jump your score up. So that's why we're focusing on the language arts. However, we will do the lesson 7, which is only 2 concepts left, and then the remaining of the time we're going to focus on reading. We're going to do some practice sections today, and run through some of that. So if you have any questions in regards to the reading after lesson 7, we'll tackle that. So feel free to ask any questions about that section. All right, so let's jump into the parallel structure. So for parallel structure, this is when you have a multi-part sentence. So typically you'll see it when we're dealing with a list. It doesn't always have to be a list, but it's typically when we're dealing with a list or any multi-part sentence. So this and that, I rather this over that, I prefer this over that, any of those like 2 parts where you have a this and that. Now, what parallel structure does is it makes sure that we have the same, whoops, sorry guys, that it makes sure that we have the same structure throughout the whole entire piece. For example, if I take a look at this example here, version 1, both of these are correct. Both of these are correct examples. However, here we have slightly different structures. We have Margot loves to dance, sing, and draw. Notice dance, sing, and draw are all parallel. They're both actions, or all 3 actions. Then here we have Margot loves to dance, to sing, and to draw. That's also parallel because I have an action and a to in all parts. Something that would be incorrect though is if I said Margot loves to dance, sing, and to draw. Notice how that wouldn't work good because this has a to, this has a to, but this portion doesn't have a to. Either I need a to in all portions of the sentence or only one portion. Same with here in example 2. If I have something like, I not only love dancing, but also love swimming. Notice the problem here, or not the problem, but actually the good thing, is we have love dancing, which is an ing, and love swimming, which is also an ing. So that's perfect because we have the same structure in both portions of the sentence. Now here, if we have I love not only dancing, but also swimming, notice there we have an ing and an ing again. Now, in these 2 structures, notice the shell of it. What I mean by the shell is the overall just concept. Here we have I not only do this, but also do that. The this and that need to be parallel. So notice here, love dancing, love swimming. I don't say love dancing and then just swimming over here. I have both love and both actions with an ing. Same with here, if I said not only this, but also this. Notice now I have dancing and swimming. So now I just have an ing word. I don't have love in both. And that's also correct because I have the 2 parts and the same structure within those 2 parts. Feel free to let me know if you guys have any questions so far. But in order to identify that we're dealing with these multi-part sentences, it's typically going to look like one of these structures. It's either going to be a list like this, this, and that. It's going to be the not only but also structure that we just looked at, like not only this happened, but also that happened. Maybe an either or, either this happens or that, neither this nor that, prefer this over that. Pretty much anytime that you could plug in a this and that in the sentence, that's how we're dealing with the parallel structure. Right, so let's go ahead, let's do a couple practice problems for this. Let's give this one a shot. All right, I'll put the poll up. All right, feel free to let me know what your answers are for this. I just put the poll up. Let me know if you guys can see the poll as well. If you can't see it, let me know. Okay, perfect. Looks like people are putting in their answer. Some of our answers are looking awesome. Almost everyone's got it right. Great job there. All right, I'll go ahead and the poll. And let's take a look. So here, majority of you guys chose C, which is awesome because C would be correct. So we have the structure here where we have our compost and it's minimizing water. So we have minimizes water and then increases savings. So notice here, both of these have the S at the end, and then both of them are saying what it's minimizing, and here is saying what it's increasing. So notice the structure there, it works pretty well. Also here it helps and then it's what we're helping to reduce. So again, it has the same structure throughout. Now sometimes people say, oh, well, why can't it be it? Because, you know, we have what it's like what the thing is increasing. However, in this case, then I would have to say it helps and like it minimizes. We would need it throughout the whole entire section of the sentence, which is why C would be correct here. Awesome, great job. All right, let's take a look. Actually, let me open up. I'm going to open up a couple other practice problems that are good. All right, so we're not going to do all these, but let's just do a couple practice problems here, and because I want to make sure that we have tons of practice for the reading today. So let's do this one on the screen. I'm going to start a new poll. Let me know what you guys are thinking. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to put that poll. I put a different poll. Let's do poll 2. Relaunch poll 2. Continue. Okay, did you guys get the new poll? No, you guys didn't get it? I don't know why. Sometimes it doesn't show up. Oh, never mind. Now people are saying they got it after I ended it. All right. Hopefully you guys can see the poll now. If not, no worries. Just send it in the group chat. So far, answers are looking awesome. Actually, everyone's got it right so far. Everyone that's put in on the poll has got it right, which is awesome. All right, so just for time purposes, we'll wrap up on this one. And graph calculus is perfect. So everyone that's put graph calculus, that's correct, because notice the structure here. You want to put the same structure throughout. So comprehend chemistry, understand physics, graph calculus. Perfect. All right, let's try a couple more. Let's try this one. I'll relaunch the poll for this. So remember, this is that not only but also structure. So keep that in mind. Didn't get it again. It seems like the first time I put the poll out, no matter what, doesn't work. I'll try it again. How about now? You guys see it? Okay, now you can see it. Perfect. So we're getting answers all over the board here. So just think about the structure. It's not only this, but also that. And then this and that, that's what needs to be parallel. So I'll kind of help you guys out there. So it's not only this, but also that. And this and that need to be parallel, need to have the same structure. Awesome. Looks like that's helping out some of you. Awesome. So notice here, the correct answer is going to be D. It's going to be the very last one. Why? Well, simply because of the fact that we have the not only but also structure, and in the this and that are parallel. So let's see, we have not only this, but also this. Notice the structure here, not only to her sickness, but also to the cold weather. Notice how those two things are parallel. Both have the to structure, which is why that would be perfect. Now, if you take a look at any of the others, notice how they would not work, simply because this is not only to her sickness, but also we don't have the to here. So that one's out. This one, we say to not only her sickness, but also, well, we don't have the also. So that's a big red flag. This is something called idioms, where there's certain words that are always going to be paired together, and not only but also always need to be paired together. So that one's out. And then the no change wouldn't work, because for the to, think about it like the distributive property of math. If you're a little bit more math oriented, think about if I take the to out to the front, I could either put it to the front or distribute it to both portions of the sentence. So I could say to not only her sickness, but also the cold weather. And that would be fine too if that was an answer, but we don't have that answer here. So it could either be out to the front or distributed to both portions of the sentence. Hopefully that makes sense. If you guys have any questions on that, let me know. And let's just do like one more and then we'll move on. Because again, like I mentioned, I really want to get to the reading today. All right, so let's give this one a shot. Remember the structure here. We either need A just at the beginning to distribute out, or we need to distribute it out to all aspects, and then we need an A in every portion of the sentence. So notice we could either do a squirrel, a rabbit, and a bunny. But notice we don't have that here. We either have a squirrel, no A, no A. We have either A, and no A. So let's see, this one definitely is out. This one's definitely out because I don't have an A at the beginning, even though I have it in other portions. And then no change also is out because I have A in the first one, no A, and then an A in the last one. So it kind of boils this down to this one because now A at the beginning is fine as long as you have no A in the others. You could either have an A in all or only an A in the first one, which is why a squirrel, rabbit, and bunny would be perfect because essentially you could distribute the A to all portions of the sentence and that would just work as fine as well. So in this case, that would be our correct answer. Awesome. So this is a pretty big concept on the test. I almost guarantee that it will be on your test. So definitely take note of this. Now we just have one last topic that's called false comparisons. This topic is basically just making sure you're comparing the right topics on the test. So let's take a look at this. Essentially what's going on here is you need to make sure that you compare people to people, places to places, things to things, etc. So let's say we had this incorrect one here. We have I prefer Harry's cooking over Joe. Now, notice that is actually saying that you prefer someone's cooking over an actual person. So you like an action over a person. Notice how that's no good. It's not an action to an action or a person to a person. So what I could do to correct this, so notice how this is incorrect. I could say I prefer Harry's cooking over Joe's cooking. And that works perfect because here now I'm comparing cooking to cooking, comparing two of the same actions. So that's great. Now, what if we said, all right, I don't want to repeat cooking and I want to simply just, try and condense this. How could I do that? Well, I could simply take out the cooking at the end of this sentence. Now, remember, when we have an apostrophe S, it shows the thing after belongs to that item. So what we could do when we're comparing items is actually leave out that item and it's implied that we're referring to the cooking or referring to whatever item we have in the sentence. So notice here, we could say, I prefer Harry's cooking over Joe's. And that apostrophe is showing that we already have the cooking to follow. So that one works just as well. Now we have another structure. We could say, I prefer Harry's cooking over the cooking of Joe. Again, it's a little wordy, but it still works because I'm comparing the cooking to the cooking, just like I did the cooking to the cooking of all these others. So that's good. And now our last one is also correct, but notice this word that. That is substituted in for cooking. And we'll see that on the next slide in a second. However, here we say, I prefer Harry's cooking over, I prefer Harry's cooking over that of Joe. So in this case, essentially what you could do is you could plug in that for anything that is singular. Even though it might sound a little bit weird, it still works because what this is saying is I prefer Harry's cooking over the cooking of Joe. Now taking a look at the next sentence here, or sorry, the next passage here, or slide here, this is something good to recognize, that when we're dealing with singular items are replaced with that and this, and plural items are replaced with these and those. So if you're unsure that it's a false comparison style question, just recognize that this, these, and those is a huge, huge red flag. Also, some type of comparison word like then, over, prefer, that's also a huge red flag. So we'll take a look in some of these practice problems, kind of how to put this into application. So let's go ahead and give this a shot, as well as if you guys have any questions, as always, feel free to let me know. Didn't work the poll again? Sorry guys, again, I don't know why that works. All right, post it again. If it didn't work, just feel free to type in the chat, no big deal. So far the answers are looking great. 6 out of 7 got it right. Keep in mind the words that we talked about that could substitute things in. All right, so here, most of you guys chose D, which is awesome because that's correct, but let's take a look at why. This keyword, that's essentially the reason why. So remember when we get to a question like this, to recognize that it is a false comparison question, because what we're going to work on a lot within the following weeks is recognizing the type of question it is, because it's great to have all these tools, but now how do I know that this is a false comparison rather than a wordiness question? Because wordiness, I would just go to answer choice C, kind of like what we talked about last week. So notice this keyword those replaces in for comparison items. So let me see, am I comparing anything? Well, yes, I have a keyword similar to. Similar shows a comparison. So I'm saying many of the moves in dance, such as jumps, rolls, and kicks, are similar to. Now I'm looking to compare something. So I'm comparing the moves in dance to the moves in martial arts and acrobats. Now, that's so important to recognize that we're comparing the moves to the moves is because the moves are plural. So if the moves are plural, remember we could substitute those in for the moves. Now, D is the only one that compares the moves to the moves. In A, that compares the moves to just martial arts, just the discipline in general. B compares it to the discipline, which is no good. And then C is comparing it to the martial artist to the moves. And the martial artist, we don't compare moves to a person. So that's no good as well, which is why D would be perfect. Awesome. All right. Let's just do 1 or 2 more, and then we'll jump over to the reading. Okay, let's give this one a try. Also recognize when you get to this question, the thing that comes to your mind the most is, look, we say those for, that compared with, that for. We have that, those compared, all words that are leading to the false comparison. And as we mentioned in the other one, the reason why it's not wordiness is the very last thing that you test. If you're unsure of basically what topic it's testing, first say, is it parallel structure? Is it punctuation? Is it apostrophes? Those different types of things first test, and then when all else fails, then say, all right, now I'm dealing with wordiness. Well, let's take a look at this. I'll relaunch the poll again. As always, let me know if it's there. double check to see for this, which is the thing that it's comparing. Is it comparing the training period? Is it comparing the PAs? It has to compare the same thing. So it can't compare like the PAs to the positions, because notice those are different items. It has to compare like the others. It was the moves to the moves, not martial arts to dance. Those weren't the comparisons. The comparison always has to be the same thing. A person to person, place to place, moves to moves, training period to training period, years to years. It's got to be the same item. So double check that when we're looking at this. I'll give you guys a second more. So let's take a look. We got moreover, the training period for the PAs is markedly shorter than. All right, so great. Right there, I have markedly shorter. Shorter is a transition word, or sorry, not a transition word. It's a comparison word. So we know that we're comparing two items, right? Anytime that we have an ER at the end of the word, that shows that we're comparing two items. So far, so good. No, that's false comparison question. Now, what am I comparing? Well, I'm comparing the training period of the PAs versus the training period for the physicians. So notice there, it's the training period versus the training period. So once we have the training period compared to the training period, we're going to go ahead and say, all right, let me see if I have the training period for physicians. I look through, obviously that's not there. So now I say, okay, what else could it be? Could it be that? Could it be those? Well, the training period is singular. So right there, I know for sure those is going to be out because those is plural. Now also I can cross out, delete the underlined portion, because I can't say the training period for the PAs is shorter than the physicians, because now I'm saying the training period, like the length of the training period, is actually shorter than the physical physician, not the training period of the physician, but the actual physician. So D is out. Now I have B and C that both have the word that, which is perfect because that is replacing a singular item. However, do I need that compared with or that for? Now we're pulling in two concepts to figure out what is our correct answer here. One is redundancy. Two is parallel structure. So notice the parallel structure that we just talked about. Here we have training period for PAs. So then here, training period for physicians. It's that parallel structure. We have this for that, this for that. So that tells us that C is probably going to be good. Now, also on top of that, we have the wordiness redundancy, because I already know that it's compared because I'm saying that it's shorter than something. So I know shorter means I'm comparing, so therefore I do not need to say compared with, which could verify why B is out. And that's how C is our correct answer. Okay, great job there. Let's just try one more and then we'll delve into a little bit of reading stuff. This one is a little bit difficult though, so if you guys want to give a shot to challenge yourself, this could be the one. All right, so let's give it a shot. Thanks for the bless yous. Appreciate it. Someone said, is there a poll? Yes, there should be. I don't know why it keeps not working. I apologize for this, but it's all right. No big deal. All right, I relaunched it. Let me know if you guys see it. And again, if you don't see it, just write it in the chat. No big deal. Awesome. So C and D are looking like the predominant answers for these. However, let's keep in mind, when we're dealing with false comparison, it's almost never going to be delete the underlined portion because then we're typically going to compare the wrong items. Now, delete the underlined portion is typically for the wordiness, but I know here I'm not dealing with wordiness because I have those, these, and that, which remember, those are words that indicate false comparison. So here I'm saying no transition was more successful than the transition from the golden to silver age. So notice what I do there. When I have those words, this, that, these, those, I plug in the item that I'm trying to compare. So I'm saying the transition from the golden to silver age. Now the transition is singular. So those is plural, so that one's out. These is plural, which is also out. I know that I need the transition in there, so I can't just take it out. So therefore delete is out. I also know that that is singular, therefore that would be my correct answer. So if you thought C is the correct one, awesome, great job, because that would be correct there. Right, so based off of the couple things that we wrapped up here, any last questions on any of this false comparison, any of this parallel structure, or any of the verbal stuff that we've done up until this point? We're going to switch gears in a minute to the reading, but if you do have any questions on the verbal language arts portion, now's definitely the time to address that. All right. So actually, we're almost at the halfway point. So before we jump into the reading, why don't you guys take this time now? We'll give you guys like a 5-minute break, and then we'll jump back into the reading after. So let's go ahead. All right, so I'll see you guys back in about 5 minutes. We'll go ahead, take a break, go use the bathroom, go, grab a glass of water, whatever you need to do. And then I'll see you guys back here in about 5 minutes. So, maybe like 3:55, a little bit after that. All right, so see you guys back then, and then we'll be sure to go through the reading section. So meanwhile, if you guys have any questions in regards to the reading or things that you really, really want me to go over, make sure you type that in the chat during the break. Let me know, hey, Sam, I have questions on XYZ, and then we'll be sure to touch on those concepts specifically when we go through the reading section. All right, so see you guys back in about 5 minutes, and I'll see you then. All right, so let's regroup. Let's get back together. We'll go over some of the reading tips now. So again, feel free to type in the group chat if there's anything in particular that you want to go over within the reading section. We're just going to do a little bit of everything, general tips and tricks, but if there's something that you really want to discuss, make sure you type that in the group chat. Get the video back on. Perfect. All right, so let's take a look. So for the reading section, there's a few just general tips, tricks that you guys want to focus on. So that's what we'll start off with. So the first one is always read above and below the lines. So the reason why you want to read above and below is because let's say it has a question and says, in line 22, what does this word mean? If I just read line 22, there's no way that I'm going to get my answer. Even me running through it, there's no way that I'm going to be able to get my answer just reading line 22. So you have to read at least a sentence above, at least a sentence below to overall get the gist of what the passage is talking about, to give yourself some kind of context clues to then help understand it even further. So that's always going to be a tip. Just always read a little bit above, a little bit below. Now, after that, we have something called dual passages. It's when you have two passages, essentially almost in one passage, and that you need to take them one at a time. So what I mean by that is, let's take a look at what a dual passage even looks like. So I'm going to take practice test one, for example. Maybe you guys done this, maybe you guys haven't. And let's see if they have a dual passage. I think they might. Last passage. Perfect. So it's going to look something like this. Within this one group of passage, they're going to have two small passages. Instead of one big passage like they typically have, you're going to have one passage off to one side and then another passage off to the other side. Now, what's going on with these questions is that, or these passages, is they're both going to talk about the same concept. They might have different opinions. They might have the same opinion about the concept, but they are going to talk about the same passage, kind of comparing and contrasting things. So what we typically are used to is just reading passage one, reading passage two, saying, okay, I got both passages. Now let me move on to the questions. However, do not do that. That is not a good, efficient method. The method that you want to do is taking them one at a time. Read passage one. Really understand everything that passage one has to encompass. Pretend that passage two is not even there. Go to the questions. The reason why? The first 1 to 5 questions are always going to be about passage one. So instead of reading passage one and then passage two and having passage two fresh in your mind and then having to answer questions back about passage one, let's just go ahead, read passage one and answer the questions about passage one. Let's make it a really short, more compact passage, make it a little bit more simplistic. So notice here, it says like the author of passage one. This one's the author of passage one. Our next one is about passage one as well. This is line 19, about passage one. Our following one is passage one as well. Now, in question 47, now we switch to passage two. So, okay, fine. Once I've answered all those questions about passage one, I've acted like that is one passage on its own. Now I go back, and now I do everything for passage two. And then notice there's passage two. This is about passage two. And then our last few questions are describing the relationship between the two passages. So you're always going to have a few questions just passage one, few questions just on passage two, and then a questions bringing them together. So definitely take them one at a time. Now our next tip is complete the main idea questions last. Now, the main idea questions are typically going to be the very first question within each passage. However, save them for the last question of each passage. Why? Because as you look at all the other questions, you learn more about the passage. We have to go back to the passage, read a little bit more, dig a little bit deeper. You get a grasp of the main idea even better than what you had a grasp on it before answering all your questions, because simply they're asking questions about the most important factors. So here on that, Now you need to go ahead and answer everything first, and then go to the questions, the main idea question after. Hold on, so another question. On the SAT, there are several words that I don't know. So are there any strategies to be able to understand, know the words? So, okay, so that's a hard question. So someone said they don't know all the questions or all the words on the test. So how are you supposed to answer some of the questions if you don't know the words? Well, if you don't know the words and you also don't know the context clues, now it's going to be very difficult. However, if you have a context clue that will help you understand the passage better, that's what you want to look for. So if it says like, oh, this person is being lackadaisical, and you're like, I have no clue what lackadaisical means. But then it gives you a passage and a description saying he always just sits on the couch, he never does anything. His mom asks him to get up and do something for her, and she doesn't do that. He, doesn't want to do his homework. Things, okay, well, now we can kind of get the picture that lackadaisical, I don't know what it means, but it means something about not wanting to do things. Essentially, lackadaisical is just being lazy. But notice we could use our context clues to help us insinuate what that word is. So if there's ever a word that you don't know what it is, try and use those context clues around it. Now, if you have a hard time or you don't know what the context clues are, then it's a little bit difficult. And that's actually what they're testing on the exam to see if you have that prior knowledge of the words. So pretty much the SAT word choice questions are one of the only questions on the test that it actually tests prior knowledge for all sections of the test. Everything else, it's testing things that are in front of you that you could kind of dig through the passage and understand a little bit more. So it really just deals with prior knowledge as well as if you can understand those context clues. We'll do a couple today so you could kind of see what I mean by those context clues. We'll do a passage and we'll work through that. So hopefully it'll make a little bit more sense once we run through those. All right, so now our next one is, this is a specific tip if you are the type of person that runs out of time. Now, there's 5 passages on the test. Most students only get through 4 out of the 5 passages. So if that's you and you're rushing through that 4th one and trying to get to the 5th passage, don't worry about that 5th passage. We have some tips and tricks for that. But do the passages that you're good at first. The reason why I say that is, let's say you have 5 passages, right? And the very last one is about, I don't know, let's say lacrosse or soccer or some type of sport that you really like. Now you get to that last passage and you have a minute left and you look down at it and it's telling you all the rules of soccer, why this kid likes soccer. And you're like, oh my God, this would have been such an easy passage because I literally can relate to this passage. I know all the rules of soccer. I like soccer as well. I can relate. So therefore it's more interesting. Therefore I'm going to do better on the passage. But I have a minute left. So, oh well, I got to sacrifice that passage. But imagine if you did that passage first and then sacrificed that old English passage, which was like, art thou something going on, and it was so confusing and you pretty much guessed on everything and just wasted time on that passage. So with that being said, make sure that you're able to identify the passages that you're good at. Now, how do you do that? How before even reading the passage, you say, this is a passage I'm good at or I'm not good at? Well, a couple different strategies for that. One, practice ahead. Now, even though each passage is going to be different, there's always going to be a science passage, always going to be a literature passage, always going to be a history passage, an old English passage. So there's always going to be certain types of passages on the test. So if as you're practicing on your own, you find that the science passages you always bomb, you always do horrible on. Now that tells you that if you see a passage that starts talking about DNA, that's the passage to skip for you. Or if at the beginning it always has a synopsis, it tells you when the article is written, it tells you who wrote it. So if you know that old English passages are your downfall, then when it says, oh, this passage written in 1805 or 1702, now you know that if it's written in, 1700s or 1800s, that's going to be a hard passage because it's probably going to be in that old English. Granted, it's, kind of assuming, but it's a pretty good assumption if you've practiced those passages and you already know that those are the difficult passages for you. Now, if you go into the test and you say, I don't know what passage I'm good at, what passage I'm bad at, how do I recognize it at that point once I'm actually in the test and maybe I didn't do practice ahead? Well, if you start reading a passage and you read the first paragraph and you go, oh my God, I have no clue what I just read. Most students say, all right, you know what? I'm going to refresh my mind. I'm going to start back up, go back to the first line, and I'm going to read it again. However, it's a time test. Reading it again is not a good strategy. What you want to do is say, hey, I read that first paragraph. I had no clue what was going on. This is a hard passage for me. Let me save this to last. Now, granted, if it's your last passage anyways, then you got to tackle it. But if it's maybe your second or third passage, skip that passage, move on to a better passage that you think that you would be able to do better on. Do those first, and then save the, quote unquote, harder passage for later. So that pretty much, wraps up if you're struggling with the timing. Now, obviously, we'll give some tips for the timing as well, because hopefully, let's speed up and let's try and get through all the passages. But if you find yourself struggling with finishing, this would be one of the tips for that. Now, as you're doing the questions on the exam, try and answer it in your head prior to actually looking at the answer choices. The reason why that's good is because if you come up with a preconceived notion of what you think the answer will be, and then you look down and that answer is there, then it's more inclined that that's actually going to be the correct answer. They do try and trick you on this test and put like multiple answers together, put things that are maybe outside of the concept of what the question is asking. So they try and essentially trick you. We'll go through how to manage those tricks, but make sure that you come up with something in your head, look at the answers, see if it's down on the paper. It sometimes limits you from being influenced essentially from the other answers. All right, so now another one, if you run out of time for that last passage. So let's say you get to this last passage that we talked about, right? And you get to this and you go, oh no, I have 3 minutes left. I have 3 minutes left. I have no clue what to do, because if I start reading, I'm going to go ahead and read, and I'm going to maybe after 3 minutes get up to this point and then be like, great, I got done with the passage. And then they're going to say time's up. And now you have no time to answer the questions. So essentially those 3 minutes, it would have been fine if you just sat there and just, said, oh, well, I can't utilize this time because I'm going to read the whole entire passage and not even have time for the questions. However, obviously that's not good because we want to utilize all the time possible. So when you're at the end and you only have a few minutes left and maybe you have a whole passage left. So this is the strategy for those people that are struggling on the time. Go to the line reference questions. So if I get to this passage and I say, uh-oh, I have 3 minutes, I don't know what to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to the questions. Take a look at this. I say, in lines 9 through 17, the author of passage 1 mentions several companies, primarily 2. Okay, I know exactly where that question is located. It's 9 through 17. So I could go back and read 9 through 17, hopefully get the gist of it, maybe not exactly know what's going on because I didn't read above, below, and stuff, but at least if I read that general section, I can understand it a little bit more. Same with here. If I scroll down and I see here, as used in line 19, demand most nearly means. Well, in 19, I could read line 19, maybe a little bit above, a little bit below. I could read 3 or 4 lines and hopefully get the answer to what this word demand means in the sentence. Same with here, hold, what that means. So if I have 3 minutes left, hopefully I can at least answer those couple questions right without having to read the whole entire passage. So that's a great strategy for speeding up time if you don't have enough time, essentially. Okay, so just a couple more tips. Annotate the passage. This is a tip for the types of students that read a passage, maybe understand what they're reading right in that instance. And then when they get to the last paragraph, and if I ask them what happened in paragraph 1, you have no clue. You remembered it and you understood it when you read it, but everything, the next sentence goes out the window. When you read one sentence, you get it, and then it goes out the window, and then you go to the next sentence, and so on and so forth. So you're understanding things, individual sentences as you go, but you're not able to retain that information. Annotation is the best way to combat that. There's 2 different ways to annotate, and I'll walk you through those. The first way to annotate is simply just put a bracket around each of the paragraphs and put your main idea next to each paragraph. So for example, here, I'll put 1 to 2 sentences, or sorry, not sentences. I correct that. Not sentences, 1 to 2 words. Nothing crazy. Same here. I'd put like 1 word. Here, I'd put 1 word. Here, I'd put 1 or 2 words. So after each paragraph, I could just jog my memory of what that paragraph was speaking about. Now, what a lot of people tend to do is they tend to highlight the passage. Do not do that. Highlighting the passage is a passive way of annotation. And passive basically just means that you're running through the motions without actually putting it in your head and actually understanding what you're reading. So what happens is when people just highlight, they go like this, say, oh, I think that's important. Oh, I think that's important. Yeah, that sounds important too. They just highlight things that sound important, maybe nothing that is actually important. Notice rather than here, if I write things off to the side, I'm actually just pinpointing 1 or 2 things that's the most important. Now watch what the problem is this. Now, half of my essay seems to be underlined. So if I asked you, okay, now what's the main idea about paragraph 1? You'd be like, hold on, I gotta look back. And now what am I gonna do? I'm gonna read my highlighted sections. Therefore, I'm double reading again. I'm taking more time on the material. So instead of doing that, what I could go ahead and do is just write them off to the side. Now, if someone asks what's the main idea of the first paragraph, I could just look at these 2 words and jog my memory. That's a better way of annotation rather than highlighting things. So if you are that type of person that highlights things, try and stray away from that. As we're doing practice now, feel free to practice it if you have a tablet and you want to underline things on that. If you want to print it out and practice that way, or if you have the actual tangible SAT book, that's great as well, because that's definitely going to help out in these annotation methods. So that's something that's super important. Now, another way, if you don't like writing things off to the side, even just circling the most important words is important, because if you just circle a couple words, now again, just like writing a couple words off to the side, now it helps jog your memory. But at least it's better circling a few words rather than highlighting 90% of the passage. Right, so now the one last tip that I think is the most important tip out of all these tips. There's 2 different ways to tackle this passage. The second way is what I advise. The first one is what I do not advise. However, if number 1 works for you and you have been doing that and you are doing well, then ignore me. It does work for some people. However, I'm speaking to the masses right now. Most people have issues with this reading section. Most people do not finish this reading section. Most people need strategies to save time. So option 2 is saving time. Now, option 1 is reading the entire passage first and then going to answer the questions. If you're a fast reader and you could read the passage and do it that way, all the power to you. I think that's a great way to do it, if you can finish on time. But if you're the type of person that does not finish on time, or a person that just wants to try a different strategy, see if it works better for them, option 2 is what we're going to discuss. So option 2, instead of reading the passage first and then going to the questions, which is the typical style, you are going to look at the questions first. Note where the questions are in the passage. Don't care about looking at the answer choices. Don't care about trying to memorize the question. I just want to note where it is in the passage to then answer the questions as I read. So what I mean by that is, let's say I have this passage. I'll bring us to the passage here. All right, so let's say I have this passage, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to the questions before I even read. I'm going to say, which choice best describes, okay, well, no, I'm going to skip that because notice it has no line reference. I'm only looking for the ones that have a line reference. So now I'm going to scroll further. 2, all right, I see no line. It doesn't even matter. I'm just going to skip it. Oh, 3. Line 1, what does directly most nearly means? So I'm going to go to line 1. I know it's question 3 dealing with line 1. So I'm going to do this and write number 3. Now I'm going to continue and take a look at my other questions. Notice this doesn't have a line reference. Oh, well, number 9, line 32. I don't even care what the question is asking, but line 32 is question 9. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to line 32, and I am going to go ahead and put number 9. So before even reading my passage, it should look like this. Maybe, this will be maybe question number 4. Maybe this one is question 11. So it's going to look something like this. It's not going to have every single number because some don't have a line reference, but some do have a line reference. So it's going to look something like this. Now watch what happens. When I read, now I'm going to go ahead and answer my questions. So I'm going to start reading and say, Akira came directly, breaking all tradition. Was that it? Had he followed form? Had he asked the mother to speak to his father to approach a go-between? Would she have been more receptive? Right at that point, right when I read a little bit above and a little bit below, I'm going to go answer number 3. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to scroll down and say, okay, what is number 3 asking? And let me answer that question. Now notice at that point, I skipped question 1 and 2. That's okay. I can always go back to them later. There's no rules that you have to do it in order. And I'm going to go ahead and answer question 3. Why? Because it's fresh in my mind. Watch what happens if I do the other strategy. What I would have done is I would have read that paragraph, and then I would read the whole rest of the essay, and then I'd be like, oh, okay, cool. Now I know what's going on through the whole entire essay. Then here it's going to say, as used in line 1, what does directly most nearly mean? And I'm going to say, I don't know what happened in line 1. So what am I going to do? I'm going to scroll back and I'm going to read line 1. Now the problem there is I'm double reading. I already read it once because I read the passage. Now I'm reading it a second time because I have to answer my question. So if I do it in this second method, now I'm not double reading. I read it once at that point. I go and answer my question, and I'm done with that section of the exam. Then I move on to question 4, and then question 9, and so on. So it really helps speed up pace. This is actually what I personally use. I'm not sure if Camille mentioned, but we have scored perfect on our respective areas. We are, we have studied different methods of how to get those scores. So this, I would suggest, is the absolute best way to speed up on time. If I personally just read the passage and answer the questions, I myself probably won't even finish the exam because I'm reading things a second time. You never want to read a second time. One should be enough to then be able to answer that question. Now, however, if you're the type of person where you said, there's no way I'm going to finish. I don't have a goal of a perfect score. I don't have a goal of, even a 1550 or 1500. And you just have a modest goal of maybe you want to get a 1200 or something like that. 1200, you don't need to answer even all the questions on the test to get a 1200. So for something like that, where you're looking for maybe a 600 on both, where you just need to get easy, medium questions, not even tackle any of the hard questions, maybe you don't need to worry about doing the whole test. So figure out when we do the practice test, figure out what your capabilities are, what you want to get on the test, as well as, that goal that you have in mind, because that will help you prioritize how many questions you want to do, also how many questions that you should manage within your time. Also, just basically the structure of the test and what you need to get your score, how many questions you need to do to get to that score. So that just kind of gives you a little idea. However, if you do not finish any of the sections, including the reading section, make sure you put an answer for everything. You don't get points off if you guess. A common misconception about the test is if I guess, they might take points off. You don't get points off when you get something wrong. You only get questions right when you actually you only get points when you get the question right. So let's say I have, question 1 and 2 here, right? And if I leave them blank, I don't put anything, automatically it's going to be wrong. They're just going to come back, just going to be wrong and cross them out. However, if let's say I said, I don't know what the answer is for here, or I don't have enough time, but I guess and I just put A and A, and maybe the first one's wrong, maybe the correct answer is C there, but maybe this one is actually A. So now watch, I just got a point for that. So they don't know, and it doesn't matter. And even just one question on the test could bump your score from like a 1190 to 1200. That 1200 is looking a little better than that 1190, just breaking that next threshold. So definitely, if you don't have enough time to do everything, or even if you just don't know a question, if you're like, I don't know what number 2 is, I can't even have an accurate guess, still just put a guess, still just put an answer, because I don't know, you could get it right. All right, so that pretty much wraps up the main concepts, that general tips and tricks of the reading section. With that being said, does anyone have any questions on that before we go ahead and jump into a practice together? All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at practice test 5. If you've already done this practice test, no big deal. Still can't hurt just to run along with us and do the practice with us, and see how we should go about these questions. So I'm going to go ahead in the group chat and post this practice test. Feel free to pull this up. If you do have the College Board book and you want to follow along with that, feel free to take out the College Board book. Again, remember the Princeton Review, the Kaplan, those are going to have different tests, so don't worry about those. But if you do have the College Board book, feel free to take that out now. Also, if you do have access to a printer and you do want to print out this first practice test, feel free to go ahead and do that now. We're just going to first focus on just the reading test 1, which is going to be on page 2. So make sure you guys get that up, click on the link, and then just type in the group chat when you have that up. Just say like, I got it up, everything's working, everything's fine, got it, something like that, just to let me know that everyone's set up with that, so then we could go ahead and do some practice together. Awesome, looks like everyone's getting it. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to do this passage. Now, the typical time that you have to do a passage is going to be 13 minutes. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this step by step. I'm going to give you guys about maybe like 3-4 minutes to read the passage. We're going to take a pause just to make sure that everyone is understanding the article, and then we're going to go into some of the practice problems and do some of those together as well. So what we're going to do is let's scroll down to page 2 for this first reading passage. We're going to start off with, I'll give you guys, let's see, how long? You know what? I'll give you guys 5 minutes to read the passage. If you want to take some of that time and do some of the questions as well, feel free, go ahead. We're going to go through a lot of them together, but I'll give you guys 5 minutes to read the passage. Once you're done reading the passage, just type in the group chat, done, finished, something along those lines, so then I know that everyone's completed with it, so then we could move on and review. So starting now, you guys have 5 minutes to read just this first passage. It's on page 2 as well as a little bit on page 3. If you have time and you want to continue with the questions, feel free. We're going to go ahead and do those after together. So I'll start the timer now. You'll have 5 minutes to read passage 1. Awesome. So I'm getting some messages saying that you're done. Great job. We got a minute left. Finish up and then type in the chat when you're done. All right, perfect. So let's just kind of do a quick recap before we delve into some of the questions. But basically, if you're unfamiliar with what's going on in the passage, essentially this is it. We have a person that is in a restaurant and he is reading a book. The book is about like the piece of Paris. It's about like all old times essentially, and he's very engaged in this book. However, a party of four come in and they are very, very distracting. He starts getting flustered about what he's reading. He loses track of what he's reading and he's having a hard time focusing. Now that's pretty much what's happening on this first main page. Moving on to the following page, now he's sitting there still continuing to read his book and he is expecting, well actually he's not expecting that his father is going to come, but his father does show. He says in line like 69, 70, I didn't think you were coming. Like he was at the restaurant waiting for him, but he didn't have faith that he was going to come. Now, in the passage that follows, he is now talking more about his father and saying how his father is getting gray. He's getting old. He's getting shriveled. He is essentially getting a lot older. However, in our last paragraph, we have apparently he himself was not aware that there had been any change. He himself was referring to Mr. Peters, Limey's father. And Limey's father is unaware that there's really any changes happening. He thinks that he's kind of hip and young. He doesn't think that he is, getting old. He doesn't see those changes happening. So now notice in this case, if I were going to do these annotation methods, this is what it would look like for me. And this is how I could pretty much wrap up my content. This first beginning portion is about the restaurant. So it tells all about the restaurant. Then he delves into talking about the book. Now notice I didn't even write history book or what about the restaurant, because these notes are meant to just jog my memory. Once I hear book, I'll be like, oh, right, it was a history book. And he was telling about what was going on. Notice I didn't highlight all the nitty-gritty details. If later I have questions about those details, now I just know where to look back. But at least I just got the general gist of it. So now that's about the book. Now this is a continuation of the book. It's literally all I'll put. This is, again, just continuing that same concept. Now here, we're talking about the party of four, and how they're noisy and distracting. Notice how my notes here, I'm literally not even writing out full words. Like dist means distracting. When I get to that point and I see dist, I'll be like, oh, right, they were noisy and distracting. I literally read it 2 seconds ago. Now, if you have to write things out a little bit more diligently, if you're the type of person that is not going to remember even what they wrote, that's fine too. But the point of this is just to jog your memory, not actually to take diligent notes and have those notes be able to, answer your questions from. So now if I continue forward, then the rest of the passage here, I'm going to take a couple more notes here, like maybe getting old, here, like not aware, and then, maybe here, father came. So notice now, if I need to answer any questions, I know that in this general area, this is where his father came. And I know that then they'll jog my memory. Oh, he didn't expect his father to come. He did come. He was coming to the restaurant. All those things then will jog my memory. Same with getting old. I don't need to highlight that his hair was turning gray. He was losing weight. Like every detail doesn't matter unless we have a specific question on that matter. Same with not aware. That whole thing is just about that same concept. So if they're asked detailed things about it, I can go back to that passage. So, or that paragraph. So that just gives you like a general idea about how you're generally note taking. Now, obviously, if before you read you had actual, tangible paper and you wanted to write these things out, then, or write the questions out, then notice here, question 2, the main purpose of the first paragraph is to. So what I would have done is highlight the first paragraph and put number 2, because that's my main idea. Now, the next one is line 37. I don't care what the questions is asking, but line 37 is talking about question 3. So I just go to line 37 and simply just put number 3. Then I'll continue to move forward and see that question 4 is line 42. So I'll literally just go to line 42 and put question 4. So notice before even reading this passage, I'm just going to have numbers all around my page. Now what happens is now as I read the passage, I'll read through, and once I get to this point, I'm going to go answer question 2. Then I'm going to continue reading, and when I get to this point, I'm going to go answer 3. When I get to this point, I'm going to answer question 4. Actually answer the questions as you read. Don't just put these to focus on that more and just mentally try and remember those sections. Actually answer those questions. Someone said, how much time should we take for each question? Great question. So here you're going to have about 13 minutes per passage. The reason why I say that is here you have 65 minutes, and your 65 minutes is divided in those 5 passages that I was mentioning before. So if you divide 65 by 5, that gives you 13. So already I gave you guys 5 minutes to read this passage. So I'll give you guys another, let's see, 8-9 minutes to do the remaining of this passage. So typically you want to try to spend about 4 minutes or so reading the passage, 4 to 5 minutes, which is why I give you guys 5 minutes, a little on the generous side for this one, but 4 to 5 minutes to reading the passage. So if when I said, oh, you have a minute left, you were done, that's great. It shows that you were on the right track. If it took you the 5 minutes, that's fine too, but you just might need to speed up on some other passages. And then for the rest of the questions, you'll have about 10 to 11 questions with about, depending on how long you spend reading the passage, about a minute per question, a little bit less than that, maybe about 45 seconds per question. So again, like I mentioned, it definitely is pretty fast paced, especially if you're a slower reader, which is why we want to try and incorporate some of those questions, or some of those strategies, I should say. All right, so with that being said, anyone have any other questions before we move into the actual practice problems? Okay, perfect. So I originally gave you guys 5 minutes to read the passage. Now with that, if you subtract that from the 13 minutes that you're given, there's about 8 minutes left for this practice section. You might not finish all 8, but it's just, or you might not finish all the questions in that time. But this is just to kind of give you an idea of exactly how long it is and how fast paced it is. So I'm going to give you guys 8 more minutes to finish up the rest of this passage. Just feel free to, if you have pen and paper in front of you, just mark down your answers. I'll give you guys 8 minutes to practice that on your own. Also, if you get your answers, type it in the group chat. I'd love to see what you guys are putting out, what answers you guys are choosing. When you guys put in your answers, I'll feel free, let you know if you're getting things right and wrong, so you can help have a little bit of guidance along the way too. So you guys will have 8 minutes to finish up some of these questions. We'll review that, and hopefully that will bring us till the end of class. So I will start the timer now. Feel free to go ahead and get started on the questions pertaining to this passage. Guys, keep in mind I'm getting some answers only up to 8. If you go to the next page, it has question 9 and 10. So make sure that you guys do all of them. When you guys submit it, make sure that you submit it all in one line, all one text, so then I can reach back out to you and let you know if you got the answers right. The 2-minute mark. Oh, no, guys, I just realized that I messaged everyone the answers for practice test 1 instead. So disregard that. I'll send it all out again. All right, so that's pretty much wrapping up our time. I sent out the new answers. Disregard the answers that I gave at the beginning. I will put it up as well. So this is SAT Practice Test 5. If you're looking for the answers, just put score to follow. So if you press score, we're going to get something like this. And you're going to go ahead and have these answers. So we're going to take a look at these. We got number 1 is D, 2C, 3C, 4A, 5C, 6A, 7D, 8B, 9B, and 10B as well. So that is going to be your answers for this section. So feel free to just mark if you got it right or wrong, as well as type in the group chat if there's any specific ones that you want to go over, even if you got it right. Even if you got it right or wrong, let me know if there's any specific questions that you guys want to review. Also, let me know how you guys felt on timing. All right, someone said number 1. All right, a bunch of people said number 1, so we'll definitely go over number 1. Got another question for next week. Are we going to review just the grammar section of 5 so I can finish the reading tonight? Or are we going to finish all of practice 5? Okay, so someone said for next week, like, what's the structure of the class? So next week, I believe you guys are actually on break. So there's not going to be any class next week because you guys are on spring break. Now, the following week after that, we're going to do a full practice test. We're going to do practice test 1. I will send the link out at the end of class if you guys do want to print it or get that ready for the following class. It will just be a practice test class. There will be no actually like full like instruction. So it's literally just going to say, okay, time's up. You have, 35 minutes for this section, 55 minutes for this section, and you're just going to run through independently. Now, our final and last class will be reviewing practice test 1, as well as reviewing just all general concepts. So pretty much this is our structure. So here we have next week, you have break. The following week, you are going to have a practice test. The way it's going to structure is Monday, you always have English, so you're going to do the 2 English sections. Now, it's probably not going to take the full 2 hours, so you'll be able to leave after you're finished with that section. But that's going to be a practice test, and then on Wednesday, that's going to be a practice test for your math. And then the following week is a review. So that review is going to be reviewing this practice test as well as reviewing absolutely everything that we've done so far. And then that pretty much wraps up the class. So you only have 2 classes left. This is your 1 class and this is your next class. Today is the last full teaching class, I believe. So that kind of just wraps it up. So some of you are saying oh, when are we going to do the rest of this practice test? If you want to do the rest of this practice test, up to you. Feel free, do it after class today, do it over break, do it any time that you want, and then you could, feel free to tackle it that way. So now the answers that I just went over, those are here on the board. This is practice test 5. Question 1 through 10 is what we just went over. So I'll go ahead, I'll put that in the chat as well. Remember I mentioned at first I did send out the answers. Unfortunately incorrect. I did practice test 1 for that, but I just sent out practice test 5 is what we just worked on now. So I want to quickly just run through a few last things before we do have to wrap up today. A couple of the questions. So let's just run through. I will go through quick, but if you guys have any specific ones that you really want to go through, let me know. I know 1 and 3 are 2 of them. All right, so we got over the course of the passage, the primary focus shifts from. So in this case, let's take a look. A says, Limey's inner thoughts to observations made by other characters. Notice the whole entire passage is his inner thoughts. He's thinking, oh, I'm reading this book. I'm enjoying this book. The next, he is talking about how he is just overall getting distracted. And at no point is there observation made by other characters. At no other point does another person come in and we start learning about their actual inner thoughts and their thought process. So A is going to be out. Now B is an exchange between strangers to a satisfying personal relationship. Well, there was never an exchange between strangers. Limey was pretty much just by himself at the beginning. There wasn't much of an exchange simply because he was not talking to anyone else. And then, sure, maybe you would say the personal relationship is him and his father, but there's nothing shows that it was very satisfying. So far, A and B are going to be out. That is not going to work. And then C, we have the physical setting of the scene to different characters' personality traits. So this is a big one that most people choose. It's a trap answer, and essentially the physical setting of the scene, that's the restaurant. Then it says to different character personality traits, that maybe jumps to the like noisiness and maybe the dad getting old. However, that's a big jump. We talk about the restaurant, then we have about 2.5 paragraphs about the book, and then now we jump into talking about how noisy the people are. So it's not a primary focus shift. We do talk about those two things, but it's not the shift. The overall shift is D. Limey's experience reading the book, so that is about him reading the book in the restaurant with all of that, and then to the descriptions of people in the restaurant, which are those noisy people as well as his dad that's getting older. So that's why D would be better. All right, so let's take a look even further. Number 3, we have, it can reasonably be inferred that Irma, the waitress, thinks Limey is through eating because. So for this, you want to look back at the line references and see what happens in line 37. So let's go ahead, let's scroll back and take a look. Remember, always read above and below. If I just read line 37, I'm not going to answer the question. If I just said, though he was through eating and tried to take his plate away. Okay, so why was he through eating? Why did he think that? I have no clue. So take a look, we're gonna read above and below. So I'm gonna say, when Limey put down his fork and began to count them off one by one on his fingers on his left hand, the waitress, whose name was Irma, thought that he was through eating and tried to take his plate away. So notice in this case, we are referring to that whole concept. And in this case, the whole concept is that he put down his fork, he started to count on his fingers. So since he put it down and he started counting on fingers, that's when the waitress Irma decided, oh, I think that this guy is done eating. So let me go back and answer my question, which is how I could go with C. He is no longer holding his fork. He put his fork down, he started counting on his fingers, and that's why he thought that he was through eating. Right. Any other ones that you guys got wrong that you want to review within this section? Keep in mind, notice a couple of the things that we talked about here. Like for this one, always read above and below the lines. Also here, obviously you guys didn't have it printed, or at least most of you probably didn't. So reading around it is, and actually annotating might have been a little bit difficult, but I highly, highly suggest for next time to make sure that you either print it ahead or you go ahead and, maybe have the book. So for next class, we are going to do the reading and language arts for practice test 1. If you have already done practice test 1, that's okay. I still highly, highly encourage you to come to class and pick any other practice test to do. As long as you're practicing during that time, that's the most important part. But I did put it in the group chat if you guys do want to print it out ahead of time or anything like that. However, do not look at it ahead of time. We want to make sure that you guys are able to practice and make this actually indicative of what your actual score would be. So if you take a look at it ahead of time or read the passages ahead, kind of defeats the purpose. So I'm giving you this ahead, not for you to look at it ahead, but for you to just know what we're doing in the following classes. So with that being said, does anyone have any questions on the upcoming week progression or anything that we did today that you would like to review. All right. Well, on that note, it looks like there's no questions. If you guys do think of questions, obviously feel free to reach out. If not, feel free to head out because that is the time of the end of the class. And then in next class, we'll be sure to do a practice and then do our comprehensive review to follow. So have a great rest of your day. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys next time. And again, remember, no class next week. You do have class on Wednesday, though. Right. Bye, guys.